There we go.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Hey, welcome to this episode of the NoteClosure Show. As always, Scott Carson, excited to be here with today. I know that all of you out there, we are all working towards a why. We've all got an end goal in mind, whether it's to leave our job and quit being just over broke, or to retire and do things that we want to do. Obviously, that takes some discipline. It takes you doing some things out there to find that financial independence. But a lot of us sometimes think that number is too big, or we don't know people who have done it and living the life that we want to live. And I'm so excited to have this special guest on today. One of the interesting people you meet at FinCon. We've been doing a series on this. Actually, known this guy online for a little while now. He is an amazing individual. I think his daily routine is getting up and surfing, which is always a dream of most people. Yeah, that's right. Hang 10, baby. He has a big passion for helping people get to that FI, get to that financial independence number to be able to do what they want to do. He also served in our military for over 20 years in active duty in the U.S. Navy Submarine Force, retired just over 20 years ago at 41. His wife is also a Navy reservist. He reached financial independence in 1999 on a high savings rate. They've lived in Hawaii for over 30 years. And these days, he enjoys surfing, grandparenting, slow travel, writing, public speaking, reading home improvement, and personal finance meetups. And of course, more surfing.
Sure.
So we're honored to have the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Doug Nordman, join us here on the NoteClosure Show. What's going on, Doug? How's it going today?
Thanks, Scott. It's going good. And hey, congratulations on 8 years. That's an impressive record and puts you in the top 1%.
Yeah, we never thought we'd get here, never saw us doing that, but yeah, pretty exciting. Thank you for that. Yeah, our next big goal will be 1,000 episodes here sometime, probably in Q1, stuff like that. But yeah, this has become definitely a passion of mine and
Good.
helping people. I know it's a passion of yours as well too, in helping people.
Yep.
So let's dive into this, man, a little bit. So you and your wife are in the military, and you're 20 years retired from that. That's awesome. First of all, thank you for both of your service. That's definitely great to have that. We're big with military here.
Thank you for the support.
No problem. And when you think back now, and now you've been retired for over 20 years, let's go back to 40 years ago. All right, when you were a young seaman in submarines there, how did you guys come up with the idea, or how did you plan your path to financial independence?
Well, when you join the military, you're there for a certain commitment, and 4 years, 6 years, 8 years, whatever the number is. When you have that commitment, if you're doing it right, you've got a plan to exit. And it doesn't mean that you're going to leave right away. It just means that if things don't go the way they expected to, or if your life changes, or if you hit a speed bump, you want to have a plan for making that transition out of active duty. Now, you might go into the reserves, you might go into the National Guard, but you still need to have that exit tactic then planned, ready to go. And in our case, it was saving up a transition fund. Back when I was a junior officer in the Submarine Force, trying to get qualified, trying to learn my job, trying to support the watch bill, you pick up the impression from your peer group around you that you're barely capable of functioning in the military, let alone getting promoted. And going out in the civilian world is really scary, and you'll probably be sleeping under a highway overpass within 6 months. Now, we know that is kind of far from the truth, but the reality is it scares you into saving a transition fund for, maybe 6 months of unemployment while you're looking for a job, or maybe you're going back to school on a GI Bill. That's what started us on the path to financial independence. And after a while, we realized that thank you to lots of sea duty, that we were able to have a very high savings rate. When you're at sea for 80 or 90-day patrols, you're not spending much money. And that adds to your transition fund. And pretty soon you realize you're saving 40, maybe even 50% of your income and your gross income. And from there, you can watch it start to compound. So the first few years, transition fund. About the point we get to the 10, 12 years, you're thinking about getting out and you're making a lot of commitments in that direction. And that's when you really start looking at your finances and getting squared away for pursuing financial independence. I will say that we were doing this in the 80s and 90s. And back then we were using clay tablets and wooden styluses and an abacus, and there wasn't much to help you figure out that you needed to have a calculator to get to financial independence. There were not many resources to work with back then. So we were just going with a high savings rate and hoping things would work out when we finally made that transition.
Now, did you find yourself as being the Lone Ranger in a lot of this? Do you see a lot of your buddies doing the same thing, or do were you kind of different from them with your savings rate, putting everything aside? The reason I know plenty of buddies that were broke from paycheck to paycheck, and they were on active duty and they just didn't save anything. They were always
Yeah.
looking, to go that route.
Well, the Lone Ranger analogy, that's a very good one. The part about saving a transition fund, that was pretty common. And I had many more opportunities than many other junior officers to save more money. We use terms like delinquent in studies or delinquent in qualifications. And so you're spending more and more time trying to get caught up with what you should have been doing in the first place. All of that leads to a higher savings rate. But again, we really didn't know about financial independence back then. And looking back, it's a little ironic because the books that were coming out in the 80s, I frequently wasn't aware of. Sometimes it was just because I was at sea for 3 or 4 months. Other times it was because it just wasn't top of mind back in the 80s. When we started our family in 1992, that's when I realized my priorities completely realigned with our baby daughter, and that's when we realized we wanted to spend more time with family, watching our daughter grow up and enjoying a better work-life balance. By then, we had read some books. You might remember Your Money or Your Life, that showed up in the library's hot picks shelf in 1993. I was all over that one. And a few years later, of course, Millionaire Next Door came out, and that kind of set the trend for us.
Very nice. Yeah, big. I've actually got it right over here on my bookshelf, Millionaire Next Door.
Oh yeah,
One of the great books that we always recommend for folks to get started, because it's kind of the anti keeping up with the Joneses that society is in these days in a
right.
lot of cases. There was an article that actually just came out yesterday talking about like the most expensive places to live and the ratio of people with debt. And a lot of it is like auto debts at all-time high, and I think about the Millionaire Next Door talks about the average millionaire wears a late model or drives a late model Ford F-150 white pickup. And for years I did that.
It's turned into a stereotype in the military. Go make a combat deployment, come home, you deserve a pickup truck, and that will keep you in the military for a very long time.
Yeah, exactly.
Unfortunately.
Exactly. I used, not brand new. I just smooth that
Uh-huh.
I bought many.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, used pickup, not a brand new one for sure. Not the way they're priced these days. But so you're in when you got out of the military and your transition fund, and you're living in Hawaii right now. Were you
Right.
stationed there and you decided to stay there? How did that kind of work? Because Hawaii is not a cheap place to live, though, right?
Not at all. And you have to solve the housing problem to be able to live a sustainable lifestyle here. We were sent to the islands in 1989. We both got stationed in Pearl Harbor because at the time we were sent here, two military, no kids, no pets. It was easy to send us out here. I did not understand. We thought San Diego was where we wanted to go, but when we
Mm-hmm.
came out here to Pearl Harbor, I had a sea duty tour. One little secret among the submariners in Hawaii Navy and also in Guam is that it's very easy to get out of the port and get to sea from here. It's far easier than it is anywhere on the mainland or in some overseas ports. And that, of course, the weather and the lifestyle. We didn't really appreciate it until 5 years later. We actually got left. We actually got asked to leave Hawaii to get a billet in San Diego, and we went to San Diego. And San Diego is a great consolation prize if you can't live in Hawaii. But every time we came back to Hawaii for various temporary duty state weeks of instructor duty, every time we came back, landing at Honolulu Airport felt more like coming home than landing back in San Diego. So we've lived here for most of the last 35 years. And when we were approaching retirement, we did not want to leave Hawaii and go to some other part of the country. Our daughter was 9 years old when I retired from active duty, and she was quite happy in school, and she had no interest in living anywhere else at the time. And even today, now that she's in her 30s, I mean, grown, flown, launched, married, has her own daughter. They spent most of their career trying to work their way back to Oahu, and they've just made that happen in 2024, just this year. So that's the best part now is having all three generations of our family on Hawaii, spending time with our granddaughter, and it really makes a big difference. But I will say that it is difficult to sort out the housing situation here. Once you figure out the real estate here on the island, and there's ways to do it. Once you get that figured out, most of the rest of the lifestyle is not that expensive. And once you eat local instead of eating mainland foods, once you live local with bicycling and outdoor activities, you're actually it's a great lifestyle, and it's actually not that expensive. But housing, big problem.
How'd you figure out the housing side there in Hawaii?
Sweat equity. We just bought a home that had been used hard in 1989 and put a lot of home improvement and sweat equity into it. And then Hawaii went through a big real estate recession in the 1990s, and it lasted for a decade. And as it was bottoming out, now, by the time the recession hits the bottom, everybody's convinced everything's going to go to zero anyway. Everybody's lost faith and capitulated. And by the time that happened here in the year 2000, we found the home we're living in today, and we've lived here longer than I've ever lived anywhere else in my life. And again, great property, great floor plan. The structure was in terrible condition, and everything else had been neglected, and there's a lot of deferred maintenance. So again, lots of sweat equity. But we've had 24 years to work on it, so it's looking pretty good now.
Definitely, and I imagine the value's gone up quite a bit as well over the
Oh, it
last
has.
20
It's
years. Yeah.
it's gone up quite a bit, and part of that was buying at 405,000 in the year 2000, and then dumping another 150,000 over the years. And real estate here appreciates a little faster than inflation. Over the last 20 years, it's been almost 6%, which I think that's unsustainable. I think we're due to peak and flatten out for a while, maybe just stick to the rate of inflation.
Yeah, you see that. Well, I mean, we see that here in Austin, Texas, where I'm at, one of the highest markets
Exactly.
for a while. We were seeing 5, 10% annual appreciation, and then it's kind of flattened out here in the last 24 months. People say, "Oh, it's a crash." Like, no, 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 it's a slight correction, not a crash in a lot of cases.
It's a pause while we wait for it to catch up. And Hawaii is finally, the island of Oahu is finally building more housing. We've
Hmm.
got a 15,000 home neighborhood going down in Ewa Beach, and we've got a neighborhood you can't see out this back window, but it's going up right across the gulch from our house in our backyard. And that's going to be another 3,000, 5,000 homes. And we have a severe housing shortage, which is one
Yeah.
of the reasons that real estate is so expensive. So it's good to see more of that opening up for families, and people can raise their kids here without worrying about how they're ever going to afford to live on their own on the islands.
Yeah, you've had some issues with a lot of investors coming over and buying a lot of the real estate and converting them into rental housing or not
Yeah.
or Airbnb, short-term rentals in a lot of cases too, right?
Short-term rentals. And there's laws passed. All the islands have their own county government, and so there's various laws. But generally, anything less than 30 days, you've got to be in a special permitted resort area. And the gold rush days of the 2010s, the era when Airbnb really got going, that's over. However, it is still able to be used for long-term rentals. For example, the first house we bought way back in 1989, we still own today, for family reasons mostly. But we rent it out, and the market rent, the cap rate is about 3%. Now, a 3% cap rate against the rest of America pretty much sucks. But here on the islands, that's a pretty good cap rate. And again, for family reasons, we're hanging on to it. So we're not losing money on it. There's not much of an opportunity cost to have real estate, and it's actually a good diversifier, right?
Exactly. And then you think all the depreciation stuff that you can write off on it as well too.
Well, this is our last year for that. We're at year 27 and a half. So yeah,
Not
we'll
to
be paying a
fi-
little more next year.
yeah, pay a little bit more next year. Now, what did you go into? What did you transition to once you left the Navy? What kind of jobs, what kind of things were you doing to help secure your financial independence and keep that thing rock and rolling?
I have a story for everybody thinking about leaving active duty. The first thing you want to consider when you are finally ready to make that commitment to leaving active duty is to think about the reserves or the National Guard. It's all the parts of the military that you appreciate: the camaraderie, the mission, the challenge, serving something bigger than yourself, being part of a team, but a lot less of the sucky parts. There are still sucky parts, but there's a lot less of the sucky parts.
But less
So
suck to embrace then, basically.
right. You don't have to give it a great big bear hug, maybe just a little squeeze every once in a while. And the advantage of that is a gradual transition, of course. Maybe you're going to balance a reserve career with drill weekends, or even an extended period of active duty with a civilian career. There's many ways to do that. When we were approaching retirement, though, I went and sat down and did all those interest surveys and assessments and all the things that help you figure out what you're going to be when you grow up. And at the end of the entire afternoon of reading and taking tests and marking up the charts, we determined that I'd make a great middle level manager, or a good nuclear engineer. And I'd had enough of both of those. And so at the time I was complaining to my father. He had come down to the islands to visit, and we were talking about careers and transitions, the stuff we usually talked about. And I was complaining about that. And he gave me that look that fathers give their sons that are especially oblivious, maybe even a little ignorant. And he said, "Well, you've been in the Navy for a while. Did you guys manage to save up any money?" And I said, "Well, yes, quite a bit." And he said, "Well, if you can reach financial independence, why would you want to work after you retire?" And that was the first time that anybody had ever given me permission to not work. You're constantly thinking about the transition. You're constantly thinking about the next phase of your life. You're getting ready for that bridge career. Frankly, you really want to know once you leave the military if you can actually cut it in that civilian world, because you've heard so many scary things about it. And so that was the first time that we really sat down and took a good hard look at the numbers and began to realize that we were right on path for financial independence. And we joke that in late 1999, when we reached, 25 times the annual spending, that's the tripwire for the 4% safe withdrawal rate, that we reached financial independence at the same 15 minutes that everybody else on the internet did during that bull market.
Right.
Uh, but when I got to retirement in 2002, right in the midst of the recession after that, again, we did the math, and with spending my pension and with withdrawing from our investments at the 4% safe withdrawal rate, we were good. We were financially independent by about a nickel, but it was going to work. And plan B is always, well, I guess I could go get a job somewhere for a little while.
Mhm.
We did not have to do that. We retired right into the bottom of that recession, and pretty soon markets began to recover. Our assets began to grow again. I've got the pension and cheap healthcare, which looks very good in retrospect and also is great annuity income. So, and it's adjusted for inflation. So we were able to invest very aggressively in the stock market and catch everything as it went back up after the recession was over.
Very nice. And then, how's everything been for you with everything kind of the chaos in the markets the last couple of years?
You get used to it.
Yeah.
And so in the first chaos we had was way back in 1987, the
Yes.
flash
Right.
crash essentially
Yep.
of the 80s, and then the internet recession after the 90s and 2000, 2001, 2002. Frankly, when I was retiring in 2002, we weren't worried at all about the internet recession. We were worried about being extended on active duty with a stop loss and going to war after 9/11.
Sure.
So then when 2008, 2009 came around, the first big recession after retirement, it was worrisome and it was scary. But on the other hand, we knew we could always go out and get a part-time job just to tide us over and give our investments a little time to recover. We stayed invested in our asset allocation. That's key. No matter how bad the markets are, you can go back and look at your asset allocation plan and look at your path to continue forward on that, and you feel a little more comfortable trying to stay the course, trying to do what you have because you have that plan. And by the time that market pulled out, that had been our third major recession, and we felt pretty comfortable. I knew that recessions were going to stop bothering us when our baby granddaughter was born in early 2020. And the whole world was going into a global pandemic a couple of months after she was born. And we hardly even noticed the recession. We hardly noticed it because we were up with midnight feedings and changing diapers and focusing on another generation. But we also had been through the recessions and volatility. So the advice I'd give people is volatility is a fact of life, and you're going to get used to it if you get 30, 40 years of investing experience. It's painful, but you get used to it. I would also say that if you do feel like it's too volatile and you're ready to get upset and maybe even panic a little and you want to sell, that's a sign that you can back off a little bit on your asset allocation, add some more bonds or add the real estate and get some diversified income, move away from equity volatility. And that way you'll be able to feel comfortable investing in at least 50% stocks, maybe 60%, and do something else with the other 40% in bonds or real estate or even cash. And if that hits your comfort spot, then you'll be able to go through a recession without panicking and selling at the worst possible time.
So are you primarily self-educated, or do you have a financial planner that you consult with on a regular basis, or
No,
these?
no, no. Yeah, well, this is back in the 80s and 90s. We knew would have a high savings rate, and we might need that for a transition fund. Yeah, you don't need a financial planner for that.
Right.
Back in the 90s, I remember late 80s, early 90s, I remember talking to my dad about investing because he seemed to have some experience and know what he was doing. And I said, "Well, how do you pick investments?" And he said, oh, he said, well, I get Business Week magazine. I look at the annual mutual funds issue and I buy the mutual funds that have two up arrows. It's like, oh, okay. Well, so that was at least we had a direction at that point. We didn't have an asset allocation plan, but we could go pick out mutual funds that had two up arrows. But then starting to read Your Money, Your Life, Millionaire Next Door, research was coming out back then for the SafeMax study that led to the 4% safe withdrawal rate in 1994. The Trinity guys came along. That's the university professors that did more work on the 4% safe withdrawal rate. Now, all of this, when it came out, it was new, exciting, and frankly, it looked a little weird and wacky, and we weren't sure it was going to work out. But you start reading more, which is what I did. And you start learning more once you have the basics down. You can start looking at the math and look at the asset allocation and the diversification. It's a journey, right? You're never done learning more about investing. I will say that when we got close to my retirement date in 2002, I started calling financial advisors. And the experience of talking with a financial advisor, that free first hour, that worksheet they give you start to realize you're a little better organized than most people, and maybe you have your stuff organized a little better than most financial advisors do. One financial advisor said, well, you might as well just withdraw from your savings at, I don't know, 3 or 4% and see how that works out. And at that point, I knew that we were going to be okay. And of course, more reading over the years
Sure.
and what we learned back in the 90s has held up very well over the last 20 years.
I mean, you're not going all in on Bitcoin or cryptocurrency, stuff like that now?
Well, I went on a voyage of exploration after I retired. We started picking stocks and that
Yeah.
that worked out okay, but it was
Yeah.
a full-time job. I did sell options for a while, covered calls and naked puts, and that worked out okay, but again, part-time job. I even got involved in angel investing, and I joke with people that I learned about angel investing so that I would learn about it at the hypothetical peak of my cognition in my 40s and 50s instead of being tempted by it when I was in my 70s. That plan worked out very well indeed. And I would not advise that anybody go out and try angel investing just because you're curious. Go out there and do it because you're going to commit to it for at least 10 years, if not longer. Real estate has worked out well. Again, family reasons, and we enjoy home improvement, but the rental property over the years has aged well, and we've learned how to pick good tenants, mostly by having an incident or two with bad tenants. But we all have come up with good algorithms and good heuristics for running the property and keeping it going. Now that we have three generations living on the island, of course, and we've got our house and our rental property, it's nice to know that if we need to, we could move back into the rental property, very friendly for aging in place and free up a house here for our next generation if we had to.
Very nice. Now, what led you to write the book back in 2011? For those of you guys that don't know, the book is called The Military Guide to Financial Independence and Retirement.
That started out of a gosh, how hard could this be kind of a discussion. You lose all fear, right? But back in 2005, I was spending a lot of time on a financial independence forum. It's still around today. It's early-retirement.org. And on that forum, there was an author who had an early book on financial independence. It was Bob Clyott of Work Less, Live More. He was writing the book on the forum. He would write the manuscript. He'd go talk to his publisher. Publisher would ask some questions. Bob would come back to the forum. He'd publish a few paragraphs from a chapter, or he'd ask a question. We'd sort it all out.
Mhm.
And the book went on very successful, probably still in most people's libraries today. And Bob he's having a wonderful life. It's all financially sustainable for him. The forum had at the time about 50, 60 people in there who were either on active duty or in the Guard and Reserve or actual just veterans. A couple were retirees like me. And we started talking about the things that he was talking about in his book and the issues of what about inflation for the rest of my life? What about cheap healthcare? What about legacy, gifting, philanthropy? What about all these issues? And we military veterans started talking among ourselves and said, well, we've got pensions that if you get a pension, you've got an inflation adjusted asset. And, even if you don't get a pension in the military, you've still got a 401k savings plan and stocks and all those other things. And there were some real estate on. Anyway, the conversation became, wow, we really got this figured out in the military. If we could just get our act together and stop buying brand new pickup trucks after every deployment, it would
Right.
work out very well. And I said, wow, that sounds like a book. I'm interested in trying to write that up. And everybody said, okay, you go ahead. And We crowdsourced it. I would write a chapter and everybody would give me their feedback, and then we'd go on and finish the rest of the outline, and eventually found a publisher. And today I'm going back to what was published in 2011. Now, 90% of it is evergreen.
Right.
However, the military has changed some of the pension plans, and so I need to add a couple paragraphs about that. Update the examples with new numbers from the old pay tables to the new pay tables, things like that. Minor tweaks. We'll call it an update.
There you
The
go.
nice thing about the ebook is that if you have the ebook from Amazon on your e-reader and somebody updates the manuscript on Amazon, then it automatically updates on your e-reader. So, I tell people to buy it at the library anyway. Look at it at the library before you buy it, and if they buy it because they want to look at it, well, they're not going to have to buy it again if I go out there and update it.
Right. No, it makes a lot of sense there for you. Now, what's the thinking back now? Has there been anything that you've done along the way that you would do differently, or mistakes you made that like, oh, I should have done this different? You mentioned figuring out rentals and landlord, and that's one thing. But anything else along the way, like, I wish I'd have done this a little bit differently?
Two big lessons. The first one is do not stay in the military for 20 years if you don't absolutely enjoy what you're doing. The joke is don't gut it out to 20. And if it's challenging and fulfilling, stay on active duty. As long as you're enjoying what you're doing, or well, at least as long as you're challenged and fulfilled. Maybe not happy, but if you don't have too many days when you look in the mirror and you're miserable, well, that's misery is a sign that maybe it's time to think about leaving active duty for the Guard or the Reserve.
Hmm.
And so, in my case, we were starting our family, wanting to change our life a little bit, more work-life balance, better quality of life.
Right.
But fear and ignorance were behind that. I was always afraid of getting out of active duty because you got to give up a steady paycheck and benefits
Hmm.
and cheap health insurance. Ignorance because I did not know at the time. I had 10 years of active duty. I'd never worked with reservists or Guard. In fact, they had kind of a bad reputation in the 90s. I didn't really understand that. It turns out that was wrong, but that was the ignorant level I had back then. And of course, chronic fatigue, right? Starting a family, working long hours with the military. And so from that, out of that fear and ignorance, I stuck around for the 20-year pension. Now, if I'd gotten out in 1992, 1993, only 10 or 11 years of service, gone into the reserves or Guard, I would have started something else out. The dawn of the World Wide Web, I think I probably would have been around for HTML and websites and maybe even blogging and writing a lot earlier than I was. But the whole point is that financial independence would have worked out about the same. Maybe it would have taken an extra year or two, but quality of life and work-life balance would have been tremendous. So I tell people when you are in the military on active duty and it's challenging and fulfilling, and then suddenly the fun stops, think about going to the Guard and Reserve. And we have a lot of posts on the internet about how to get that going. And people are always welcome to contact me about it. I do a lot of email answers and phone call discussions about it. Second mistake, I didn't appreciate after we had retired that the 4% safe withdrawal rate was going to work out as well as it has. When you have annuity income from a military pension or Social Security or some other source, rental income is pretty inflation adjusted as well, right? You
Hmm.
you don't have a cost of living adjustment on your rent, but you've got market rent and it's probably going up with inflation. Anything that you've got in your assets or your income that's got some kind of inflation adjustment or inflation fighting ability, that's probably going to sustain you better than the 4% safe withdrawal rate. And I regret in 2002 at the pit of the internet recession, I got a little tight on the purse strings, a little white knuckle there. And it all worked out okay. And we missed some opportunities to have some great memories and experiences that we could have had back then. We made up for it later, but I'm just saying
Sure.
that initial fear of not understanding exactly how we could spend through a recession and how we could handle any potential failures of the 4% safe withdrawal rate, that held us back a little bit. 5 years ago, we were at 300% of what we needed for the 4% safe withdrawal rate. In other words, we had 4 times as much money as we needed for how our spending was going. That's part of it. You dial your lifestyle in with your spending. Part of it is, you eventually raise your kids and you get to that point in your life where you're empty nesters and your expenses go down. A
Right.
whole bunch of factors that you just can't analyze when you're sitting there getting ready to retire and you're in the middle of all that. But it all worked out great. And today I tell people, once you reach that tripwire of a 4% safe withdrawal rate, you've got assets of 25 times your annual spending. You are ready to stop working, you might not earn another dollar for the rest of your life. Now, we all know that's probably going to be different. You're probably going to do something that earns you some money during the rest of your life. But even then, especially if you're a military veteran, you can make your assets last until you're eligible for Social Security that's a backstop if you need it. And anything else that you'll do once you get out of the military to expand your creativity, to do what you have always wanted to do, but never had the courage to try it because of fear, those are all opportunities that take care of any potential failures in the 4% safe withdrawal rate.
Makes a lot of sense. Very good counsel there. Now, how's your path affected your daughter, and how's it going to affect your granddaughter?
That's a little contentious. Well, we share a lot of sea stories as our
Sure.
daughter was growing up, and there's a difference between what you tell an impressionable young teenager and what they hear.
Right.
And we joke that she only heard the good sea stories. And so when she was in high school, at first she thought she'd want to go to a service academy, and then later on, we at least managed to educate her enough and go enough campus tours that she decided ROTC would work out fine. So she did Navy ROTC, and when she got her commission, she started out on a destroyer in Rota, Spain. Forward
Nice.
deployed. Well, absolutely. In fact, my spouse was stationed in Rota in the 1980s. And so this was our daughter going over there in 2014. And so, of course, we immediately had to visit our daughter for
Sure.
several
Sure.
months. But the whole point is that she got out there. She was deployed to the pointy end of the spear. She got great experience. And during her 5 years, she saw everything she wanted to see and did everything she cared to do in active duty. And so she immediately went to the reserves after she finished that initial service obligation you pick up from ROTC.
Hmm.
The good news is that she met her spouse, who's also on active duty. He's still on active duty today. He's got a little over 10 years of service, but she's pointed out to him that the reserves was a really great improvement in quality of life and work-life balance. She's finished her obligation now, and she's gone on to a part-time career as a paraplanner. It's totally remote, work from home, she finds it immensely challenging and fulfilling, just helping people straighten out their finances and
Hmm.
helping them get to where they want to go. Pick a goal, let's discuss the goal, and well, now let's put a plan in there. He's enjoying what he's doing on active duty right now. He's got about 2 years left before he can get to that retention point. Um, I'm not sure which way he's going to go. It's going to depend on how nice the Navy decides to be to him, but he certainly can go to the Guard or Reserves at any time he wants, and he's got skills and he's got good advice. Our granddaughter, she's going to be 5 years old in January. She's already seen the Navy stuff, and we joke about, well, she's going to want to go Marine infantry, and we'll have to watch out for that. But we can see what's going on, and we'll be much more aware of the signs, and we'll be much more sensitive to any mistakes we might make with our sea stories. I just want my daughter, my son-in-law, and my grand. I just want them to be happy,
Right.
and as long as they find what they want to do, I just want to make sure they're fully informed. And we joke that if you wake up one morning in recruit training and you're miserable and unhappy and tired and sore, and people are yelling at you and you say to yourself, gosh, this really sucks. My life is miserable and I hate what I'm doing right now. We want you to also know that it was all your own fault. You had all the information. You had enough information to make that decision, and now you got to work through it.
Well,
As
that
long as,
definitely.
all right.
No, I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, as long as you gave him full disclosure, your conscience is clear.
That's so true. Are you working with your daughter and your son-in-law, setting up things like ESAs, things for your granddaughter there as well to take advantage of that stuff?
Absolutely. And picking up on the story of my spouse's career, she went into the Navy Reserve and then she retired from the reserves. Now, in the reserves and Guard, you still get a pension if you do 20 good years, a total of 20 years of active duty and reserve time. And when you get your pension in the reserves of the Guard, you get it at age 60. There's some provisions for a little earlier, but the biggest majority of people get it at age 60. And she reached that milestone a couple of years ago. So now we have our spending dialed in. We have assets more than we need, and now we have more pension coming in than we need. I mean, this is the happily ever after part that you see in a
Right.
movie, and nobody appreciates the survivor bias or the difficulties and how few people actually get there. Only one out of every six people that join the military stick around for the pension. So with that in mind, we've put our thoughts into gifting and philanthropy. And so we do gift every year to our daughter, our son-in-law, and our granddaughter. And she put her first deposit into her 529 in March of 2020 at the bottom. Yeah, well, good timing, sure. That was totally coincidental.
Right.
But she's probably got college covered, and she's not even ready to start kindergarten. And we also donate to charity every year. And we talk about gifting as sharing some of our inheritance now while everybody's still around to talk about it and, more importantly, enjoy it together.
Right.
And so we're going to keep doing that. I've got a plan for drawing down our finances, our net worth over the next 7, 8 years in a sustainable manner, so that when we do start Social Security in 2030, 2031, that we'll do that. We're going to get another $60,000 of inflation adjusted annuity that we do not have a need for today, but we'll be able to continue gifting and continue spending as we go. You might have heard this analogy before, but as we move from our go-go years to our slow-go years to our no-go years, I want to make sure that we don't end up triggering an estate tax. I want to make sure that we're there to help our daughter or son-in-law, even our granddaughter, if she wants it, to that next stage in life while we're all around to talk about it. I think the discussion is far more important than the dollars. And having that discussion about what do you want to do with your life? How are you going to have your personal growth? How are you going to reach success? What does that look like? What's your lifestyle going to be? We don't want to just dump a bunch of money on you without educating you and giving you the financial literacy skills for it. Now, I also joke with my daughter and son-in-law that we really are nice parents, but it's all about us. And the reason behind that is estate planning. I know that someday I'm probably not going to be capable of managing my own finances. My spouse has said many times that she is going to get to a certain age and then dump all the financial management onto our daughter. So the two of us are making sure that our daughter, our son-in-law have had these discussions enough to be comfortable with managing significant sums of money and large, intimidating sums of money that they might someday be in their own net worth, but at least managing ours for the rest of our lives without having caregiver stress, without feeling worried about the money running out, all those things. And I think that's succeeding. Again, those discussions are far more important than the dollars.
Yeah, they so are, and it's sad to see so few of those conversations taking place a lot of times
We don't talk
in
about money,
families.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, that's unfortunate. We need to do that more so. Um,
Yes.
you mentioned, yeah, you love talking and helping folks out. Do you see an increase in people getting out of the military struggling in a lot of cases, not only just financially, but also there's an increase in PTSD and things like that too that cause people to struggle?
The numbers, it's ironic. The military has drawn down almost 50% since Vietnam era. And of course, World War II is ridiculously high numbers compared to today. Part of the drawdown over the last 50 years has been automation and different types of executing warfare. So let's call it 2 million people active duty and reserves today, and about 200,000, about 10% are getting out every year. On the other hand, we're also much more aware of the issues than we ever were in the 80s and 90s. And so it seems like there's more mental health issues. It seems like there's more physical disability. It seems like there's more PTSD and other problems. But a lot of that is a reflection of the awareness. And thank goodness it is, because we didn't even understand PTSD in the Vietnam War. We medicated that with alcohol and tobacco, and since then it has gotten much better. We still have a stigma associated with it, or people, especially service members, are reluctant to seek assistance or seek counseling, or they either feel like they're weak or they're worried about getting beached or benched or grounded. Those are all issues that we need to continue to work on. But I think in general terms, the transition is going much better. When I hear about service members leaving active duty, they complain about the transition assistance program because the phrase is complaining happily, because they already feel like they understand what they want to do for a career. They don't need that much career seeking assistance. They already feel like they've got their finances sorted out, or they know they can go to the financial service center on base and get all the free counseling they want. So I think everybody's much more aware of the issues and much more proactive. I know the Veterans Administration has really improved in the last 10 years. And I think there's a lot better care for the veteran that gets out of active duty these days than there was even 20 years ago. So
Right.
it's all very encouraging, but there's still many things to watch out for, many things to be careful. I find the more that I get experience at talking about finances with people, The fewer questions I get about financial independence or 4% safe withdrawal, everybody knows that stuff. It's all over the internet. How
Right.
hard could it be if Nordman did it? And the other side of that is that they are more worried about the emotions of behavioral financial psychology. And that
Mhm.
kind of ties in with PTSD and trauma and just general fear that comes out of the military. And we have a lot more conversations about that and about helping vets and about the VA helping people. So it's probably the more important part of financial independence.
I would agree with you there 100% for sure. Now, the most important question, how far are
Uh-oh.
you from the beach and how many times a week do you surf?
I swear he's not planning that question. The the area we live on, Oahu, central Oahu, is 30 minutes from my favorite South Shore beach at White Plains Beach, and it's 30 minutes from the famous North Shore surf.
Yep.
I just got back from surfing Haleiwa a couple hours ago. My hair's still a little wet. The the that's 30 minutes each direction, but the reality is that Central Oahu is a pretty good school district. That's where our daughter went to school, and that's where our granddaughter will start kindergarten next summer. I used to paddle out 4 or 5 times a week, and today I feel like I'm fortunate if I can muster the inertia to get out there 2, 3 times a week. I do need those recovery days,
Yeah.
but every time I go out there, I'm trying something new with a different board or a different technique or tactic, or trying to improve on some other part of surfing. So 2, 3 times a week now. Summer, the South Shore is pretty good in the summer, and in the winter,
Yeah.
the North Shore is very good. And in fact, there's more North Shore surf than I am capable of surfing in the winter. But it's all challenging, and I find it tremendously fulfilling as a retirement activity. Let alone the physical fitness
Sure.
and the benefits of just getting out there on the water and enjoying everything going on around me, and occasionally catching a nice wave.
Yeah, there's something to be said about the power of water, whether it's sitting there
Oh
or
yeah,
riding it. There's just something about being on the water that definitely allows stress to go away and help you no matter which way you're going in a lot of
yes.
cases. So, Doug, it's been such great having you on the podcast here. Such a great story. Where's the best way for our listeners and our audience out there to connect with you, ask questions, and follow your journey?
Most of the writing that I've done over the last 2 decades is on militaryfinancialindependence.com. I know you're going to put that in the show notes.
Yep.
That's my site, and it's got a lot of personal part of the personal finance in there. It talks about what I've learned over the last 2 decades and how I've felt as I went through the process. I also write a lot at a friend's site. The name of that site is themilitarywallet.com. And my byline's there. You just go there and search for Nordman. You'll find the things I've written there over the years. I also answer emails, and I get a lot of email. I'll give you
Sure.
my email address. You can put it in the show notes. It's already all over the
Yep.
internet and the dark web everywhere. No
Yep.
worries about that. It's nords@gmail.com. Send me an email or comment on a blog post or use the contact me form to get a hold of me that way. And so far, I'm answering every email I get. I'm also on Facebook under my name, Doug Nordman. That's all totally public. I want people to understand what the financial independence lifestyle looks like, what we're working on, what we're concerned about. I got a lot of photo albums on there from travels we've made around the world over the last 20 years. So that's a good way to stalk somebody who claims to be financially independent because he is, and that it's working out because it really is working out very well, and things that come up and issues that pop up. So that's on Facebook, and of course, there's many Facebook groups that talk about military financial independence. I can give people suggestions if they have questions, but they'll find those, and I'm there too.
Awesome. Awesome. We'll put all that in the show notes. Last final question. What's your favorite Hawaiian meal or food there that you don't see everywhere else? What's your favorite thing? Probably it's native to the island.
Okay.
Yeah, there we go. It doesn't taste the same anywhere else. It tastes totally different there.
I don't eat Omaha or Texas beef here on Oahu, and I don't eat ahi on the mainland. But around here, ahi poke is one of my favorites.
Amen to that, brother.
Yeah.
Amen to that. Well, it was great seeing you, although
All
briefly
right,
at
Scott.
FinCon, but we look forward to seeing you next year in Portland. You can be making the trip out there as well.
If I'm not somewhere else in the world, we're looking at our schedules. I think we can put FinCon first and then go somewhere else after that. We're looking at New Zealand or Australia when it gets a little warmer, late
Sure.
September, early October, so that doesn't interfere with FinCon this year.
Awesome. Well, good. Great having you on the show. Thanks so much for coming on and
All
sharing
right,
your
Scott.
insight. Hang 10, buddy.
Thanks a
All
lot.
righty.
Talk to you later.
Yes, sir. All right, guys and gals out there. Doug shares some great tips out there. A lot of resources there at the end. We'll make sure to put all those in the show notes for you. take him up, reach out to him. He answers his email, and hopefully he'll answer when he's not sitting on the board someday out there for you. But go out, take some action, everybody.